start this evening session with the student bursary presentation. Can you hear me? It's okay? It's on? Okay. So, of course, as you know, ICOM is basically a professional association of museum professionals. And of course, we are aware of the coming generation, or let's say future colleagues. And that's why we have this in our program, this specific session. So dedicated to students who apply to ICOM-Nathist for getting a scholarship. So for the future, I invite also other people for applying for this, because it's a really pleasure for us for getting this kind of a specific profile and of, let's say, as I said, our future colleagues. So especially I'm happy because this year we are very happy to have 4 people with us getting this scholarship. And especially also it's very fine because they are coming from a very different part of the world, you will see. And so we can get, and it's also a goal and purpose of the ICOM to have a global perspective on our profession. So we are very delighted to have all of you with us, all 4 of you with us, and especially you are all on site with us here in Nantes. So to start, I would like to start with Syed MUDASSIR Ali. He completed a Master of Science in Museology and is currently pursuing a doctoral research in museology at the Indian Institute of Heritage, India. So the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to all. Thank you for inviting me. It is a great honor to be here. Today I am presenting the topic, Enhancing Sustainability and Cultural Diplomacy through Collaborative Exchange of Natural History Collection among Museums. Now let's start. Natural history museums around the world are essential to education, scientific study, and public engagement. In this fastest growing world and rapid environmental change that causes serious damage to biodiversity, it is important that natural history museums across the globe more clearly define their function both practically and theoretically. In the context of sustainable development, natural history museums are uniquely positioned to contribute to global effort to conserve biodiversity and promote cultural understanding. By facilitating the exchange of collection, museum can foster international collaboration, enhance the sharing of knowledge, and support the development of strategies that address global challenges such as climate change, habitat loss, and cultural erosion. This paper aims to investigate the role of natural history museum in sustainable development and address the possible advantages and difficulties of exchanging the collection among museums. It is also explore the identifies the impact of exchanges and challenges to inform future initiatives promoting socio-ecological understanding and awareness using case study and best practices across the museums. Natural History Museum and Sustainable Development. Sustainable development defined by the United Nations aims to fulfill present needs without compromising the ability of future generations, integrating environmental, social, economic, and cultural dimension as core pillar. Historical evidence demonstrate that rapid environmental degradation and biodiversity loss have imposed significant ecological constraints on continuous economic growth. The Limits to Growth report by the Club of Rome in 1980s highlighted the finite nature of Earth resources, arguing that unchecked growth would eventually lead to ecological collapse. Natural History Museums serve as critical institutions that bridge past knowledge with future-oriented strategies, playing a pivotal role in conserving natural and cultural heritage. These museums are vital for dissemination of scientific knowledge, fostering interdisciplinary and cross-cultural dialogue, and preserving the biodiversity and cultural diversity essential for sustainable development. Museums are increasingly recognized as agents of change, influencing public perception and shaping environmental policies. This is the example of Bhopal, India. The Tribal Museum stands as one of the best instances of sustainable development. Its permanent exhibition promotes eco-friendly living while highlighting indigenous sustainable technique, including agriculture and water conservation. By educating nearby communities and schools, the museum outreach initiatives promote sustainability at the local level. Okay. The National Museum of Natural History, NMH New Delhi, has launched In Our Lifetime campaign, which encourage youngsters to support sustainable lifestyle. The initiative is a collaboration with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and United Nations Development Program. With the goal of inspiring youngsters to become sustainability champion, the campaign honors young leaders throughout the globe. The Our Broken Planet, this is another example. Exhibit at the Natural History Museum in London exemplifies how museum can engage the public in discussion about sustainable practice and the future of the planet. To maximize their impact on sustainability, Natural History Museum must collaborate with various social sectors, integrating biodiversity conservation into public and urban development policies. The integration of these ideas into museum exhibit and educational program can help make biodiversity protection and ecological awareness central to the social values. Cultural diplomacy through collaborative exchanges. Museums are increasingly involved in cultural diplomacy, facilitating cultural exchanges and enhancing mutual understanding between nations. An example is the growing engagement between museums in New Zealand and China, which promotes cross-cultural dialogue and cooperation. The concept of museum diplomacy has emerged, referring to the intersection of international museum work and state-sponsored cultural diplomacy. The practices enables museums to participate more effectively in global cultural partnership, using their collection to foster international dialogue and understanding. Engaging in cultural diplomacy through collaborative exchange allow museums to enhance their international presence, attract new audience, and enrich their collection and exhibition. These activities provide significant value to the cultural sector and its stakeholder by promoting cross-cultural understanding and cooperation, which are essential for addressing global challenges. Further investigation into museum diplomacy is necessary, particularly regarding the impact of museum partnerships on cultural diplomacy. More data is needed to bridge the gap between museum theory, policy, and practices, ensuring that museums continue to play a vital role in international cultural relations. Challenges and opportunities. While the collaborative exchange of natural history collection offers numerous benefits, it is not without its challenges. One of the primary challenges is the logistical and financial constraints associated with transporting fragile and valuable specimens across international borders. There are legal and ethical considerations related to the ownership and repatriation of cultural artifacts. Despite these challenges, there are significant opportunities for museums to enhance their collaborative efforts. Now the conclusion is the collaborative exchange of natural history collection among museums is a powerful tool for enhancing sustainability and promoting cultural diplomacy. Sharing their collections and working together on research and exhibition projects, museums can reduce their environmental impact, expand their educational reach, and foster cross-cultural understanding and cooperation. As the world faces increasing environmental and cultural challenges, the role of museums in promoting sustainability and cultural diplomacy has never been important. Embracing collaboration and working together to address these challenges, museums can help to build a sustainable, harmonious future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You'll have some time later for question. And classical. Now welcome Yu-Hsien. She's a master student in agricultural economics with a double major in climate change and sustainable development at National Taiwan University. Floor is yours.
Hello. Bonjour à tous. I'm CHEN Yu-Hsien, and it's my pleasure to present here in this conference. And so the topic of my presentation will be the museum activism in the age of climate crisis. And so later on, I will walk you through like what is museum activism in this climate change, climate crisis area, and then a case study in Taiwan. So maybe we can begin a little bit from some events that have brought museum activism into the spotlight. So in October 2022, you may have heard of this event as well. So 2 individuals entered the gallery and splattered tomato soups on Vincent van Gogh's iconic sunflowers. And this audacious act aimed to draw attention to the urgent need to address climate change. And since then, radical environmental activist groups have carried out a series of destructive attacks on globally renowned artworks. And in response to these events, ICOM has strongly condemned the protest and denouncing them as a risky endangerment to cultural heritage. However, in the meantime, ICOM also seeks to remind us that the essential role of museum plays as a critical actors in both initiating and supporting climate action. So by highlighting the importance of museum in addressing environmental concerns, ICOM underscores the need for constructive engagement and dialogue to find sustainable solutions and that protect both our artistic heritage and our planet. So when art vandals choose museums as their stage, they do so intentionally. Museums were seen as a platform for them to enable their actions to draw attention to their cause and to gain media attention and hopefully lead to the initiation of positive changes. So these raises important questions about the role and the mission of museums in contemporary society, that in the era of increasing social and environmental challenges, then what can museums do? To understand the significance of museum activism and what exactly is museum activism, maybe we can explore a little bit of the history of museology and its shifting paradigms. So in the 1980s, the emergence of new museology marked a departure from traditional practices. It caused the museums to reflect on their roles and engage with local communities and address social issues. And the central focus of museums thus shifted from the objects to more people-oriented focus. And after the rise of new museology, public museology gained prominence also in the late 20th century. And while new museology's emphasis is on challenging traditional museum practices and incorporating multiple perspectives, public museologists' focus is more on actively and critically interpret real-world social issues and foster interdisciplinary dialogues and transcend the traditional boundaries so as to respond to the needs and concerns to the society. And as we walked into the 21st century, museums face a crucial turning point, and the complex social issues of our time require museums to not only embrace diverse stories and perspectives, but also take an active role in making a difference. So in 2013, the UK Museum Association put forth the concept as well as a report and a campaign called Museum Changes Lives. In which it asserted that museum can increase our sense of well-being, help us feel proud of where we have come from, and inspire, challenge, and stimulate us. And in addition to significant principles underscore are just exactly that museums are not neutral spaces, and that social justice is at the heart of the impact of museums. However, the roles of museum can extend even further beyond the engagement with the audience, I think. So they have the potential to encompass not merely the visitors, but also the museum curators and staffs themselves, and making them a comprehensive activist. So as a result, Jensen Sandoz in 2019 proposed the idea of museum activism and defining it as an approach to museum practice shaped out of ethically informed values that is intended to bring about political, social, and environmental change. So in this stance, museums not just respond to external activist pressure, but purposely initiate campaigns or discussions in direct response to the societal environmental concerns, thereby engaging in internal museum activism. So in the evolving context, the traditional model of one-way communication thus becomes a two-way exchange and foster a mutual understanding and interaction between the museum and its audience. So to be specific, my research question now would be, how is climate change museum activism practiced in Taiwan, and what are the impacts that the climate-focused museum activism practice had on the public awareness and behavior in Taiwan? So the method is that I conduct a case study in Taipei Biennial 2020, and I apply the theory of change to analyze it. And just to be clarified, I didn't join in the curating process, so the following analysis will just be a non-participant observation and context analysis. So the Taipei Biennial 2020 was held by the Taipei Fine Arts Museum, and it was curated by the French anthropologist, as mentioned yesterday, Bruno Latour. And the theme of this biennial is called "You and I Don't Live on the Same Planet." So the exhibition aimed to explore the complexities of our relationship with the environment and the impact of human activities on the planet. And beside the artwork, what was so special about the exhibition must be the theater of negotiations. So the theaters of negotiations was proposed by Bruno Latour as well, and it was initially implemented prior to the COP21 in Paris as a simulated summit, and its purpose was to creatively examine the dynamics of negotiations during meetings. So one of the most groundbreaking aspects of this approach is the inclusion of the role of non-human agents. So this challenged the notion of human centrality and embracing the complexities of cosmopolitan governance. So this pedagogical format was taken back to Taiwan to the Taipei Biennial 2020, and it was curated by the public programs curator of Taipei Fine Arts Museum. And it was implemented by researchers from also in collaboration with Science, Technology, and Society, STS associations, and also students from 5 universities. So through role-playing, the program addresses pressing social controversies ranging from climate change to nuclear waste and food safety, renewable energy, and so on. To be specific, the 5 negotiation theaters topics are offshore wind power in progress, and the second one is you and I and our climate footprint. And also anticipating reproduction, revisiting plasticizer food, and finally the pending future of nuclear waste. So before they performed this negotiation theater in the Taipei Fine Arts Museum, actually before them is a a series of training in courses in 5 different universities as a curriculum. And after a semester of training and discussing in class, they decide what are the who should be the main stakeholders in each of the issues, and what are their what should be their statement, and what's so important about this issue. And so to monitor the progress and assess the societal impact of museum activism, the theory of change is frequently utilized. And this framework established the causal paths that are expected to lead to the desired transformations through an intervention. So it includes 3 levels: individual empowerment, institutional influence, and public awareness and education. So by employing this framework in the case of theater of negotiation in Taipei Biennial 2020, several valuable insights can be gleaned. So at the individual level, the integration of the theater of negotiation into school's curriculum empowers students with valuable skills and abilities. So the primary objective of this format is not to arrive at a definitive decision, but rather to cultivate participants' ability to act as stakeholders and collaboratively explore potential solutions to policy controversies. And through a semester of participation, students delve into contentious topics, engaging in dialectical discussions that transcend subjective emotions. And this immersive experience also provides them with opportunities to refine their physical and vocal expression skills. And with that, they develop a deeper understanding of complex issues and learn to navigate different perspectives, and acquiring the capability to find common ground amidst diverse viewpoints. As for the institutional level, the curators and staff of the Taipei Fine Art Museum work collaboratively with scholars from the field of science, technology, and society, STS, engaging in interdisciplinary corporations beyond the refines of the specific field, and this allows diverse areas of expertise to join the museum practice and employ distinct modes of thinking, and the coexistence of advantage and challenge emerges within this context. As for the level of public education, this innovative approach fosters a public dialogue system that encourages active participation and collaboration. So by bringing together diverse voices and perspectives, the biennial created a platform for activated citizenship. So to sum up, museum protests by environmental activists have sparkled debates and raised concerns over the roles of museums, and the concept of museum activism suggests that museums should not only act in response to outer space or outer impact, but also to take action from interior, including the curators and the staff. So in Taiwan, the Taipei Biennial 2020 will successfully use the theater of negotiation to deepen the public engagement and education on climate issues. However, we still want to how to replicate and scale up this kind of practice and to localize it, to adapt it to local conditions to address social needs is still a topic to explore and to nurture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I will welcome Gil CHATAIGNER. She obtained a bachelor's degree in environmental biology and a master's in museology. And now she is a PhD student in the muséologie, médiation and heritage program at the University of Québec in Montréal.
Bonjour, ça fonctionne? Oui. Déjà, je m'excuse parce que mon diaporama est en français. mais de toute façon, l'ensemble des choses que je vais dire vont s'exprimer verbalement, donc vous ne manquerez rien. Je suis ravie de pouvoir être là, devant vous, et de vous parler d'un des divers éléments.
Sorry, so I'm really delighted to be here with you today to talk about one of the theoretical building blocks of which I'm developing my doctoral research project. So what I want to do today is try to address some of the issues surrounding the aesthetic experience of encountering naturalized specimens in Western natural science museums. Oops, sorry. Well, some of the issues I will be discussing today may seem obvious at first glance. They are in fact rarely discussed per se for their own sake, right, in the scientific museological literature, in French and English at least, right? It is therefore important to develop concrete theorization of these issues. Now, my presentation will be divided into three parts. To start with, let's say, reinvesting the collection of naturalized specimens. So why we look at the case of naturalized animal specimens at all, when the future of museums already has a lot to think about in terms of new technologies, new forms of museum experience, new digital and intangible objects, right? Well, firstly, because taxidermy collections are present in very large numbers in the majority of European and North American natural science museums. And in most cases, they have been collections at the very foundation of these museums. So now, as part of the drive to slow down the frenetic pace of museum activity symptomatic of Western societal issues, there is an increasing talk of a museological movement that would see the collection return to the center of the museum. This is all the more the case given that enhancing the tangible collection already held by museums is increasingly seen as one of the eco-responsible practices to be undertaken, going against the logic of accumulating artifacts that was long thought to be unlimited, when in fact it was unsustainable. And the alarming observation that ecological metamorphoses are unsustainable for humans has also prompted what? So let's slow down. Oh, okay, I have to slow down. Sorry, so I'm going to slow down. No. So, to renegotiate our links with the rest of the living world with which we coexist on Earth. So, in this context, since naturalized specimens still offer an encounter, let's say, with an animal body on a real scale, it remains interesting for institutions to continue to explore the potential aesthetic experience they offer visitors. So, what am I trying to show you now? Wait on. It's not working. Ah, right. Oh, yeah, it is. Ah, okay, super. Right, so museums are trying to reinterrogate these representations on the animal body to bring out new ways of relating to reality, new ways of understanding the living world, and new narratives of the living. So continuing to invest in these artifacts, it's very well, but how, right? So how can the decisions surrounding the display of naturalized specimens be thought through so that they allow these collections to adequately support contemporary museum discourses? So, in order to find answers to this vast question that many people are asking, I am particularly interested in the comments made by a growing number of thinkers, highlighting the extent to which the keys to modern Westerners making progress in the face of current socio-ecological challenges lie, among other things, in the orientation towards the sharing of a new environmental aesthetic. So, in other words, sharing other ways of perceiving, feeling, and appreciating nature when they are underpinned by values of profound recognition of our cohabitation with multiple other species would in fact lead to ways of living that pay attention to our ecologies implemented in an embodied way and not just applied. So, for example, in her text, Towards a Genuine Environmental Aesthetic, the philosopher Emily Brady argues environmental aesthetics represents an opportunity to create an ecological aesthetic where humans are decentered and become part of the ecological community. Such engagement can lead to greater sensitivity to the qualities of the environment and a greater awareness of their value. Extending this line of thought, Emily Brady argues that such a reconsideration of a collective aesthetic appreciations would also redistribute the sense of legitimacy of appreciating the environment, learning about it, and leading to more inclusive access to ecological concerns. Emily Brady therefore concludes, environmental aesthetics can help to cross boundaries between subject and object, non-human and human, individual and community, private and public, local and expert. So I suggest that over the next few minutes we look at some of the answers to this question. How has the display of naturalized specimens helped to forge a certain aesthetic appreciation of animals that runs counter to an aesthetic that could be ecological and inclusive? So, as with any other artifact exhibited in a museum, when a naturalized animal specimen is put on display, it is because it has been selected at each stage of a more or less long chain of decision-making by a set of designers. And in this chain of decisions, the designers agree on the scientific discourse that a device will communicate to visitors. However, it may happen that several specimens in the collections are suitable as artifacts for conveying this message. And now I'm interested in the way in which the selection of a specimen from among all those that correspond to the same scientific discourse is always at least partly based on criteria of visual aesthetic appreciation of the animal from the animal form that the specimen carries. The animal form, sorry. Because, far from being objective, immutable and universal, the visual appreciation of an animal is in fact always influenced in particular by a set of social-cultural values that are shared at a given time within the society to which the viewer belongs. Now, as part of my master's thesis, I carried out a literature review to divide into 4 main categories the parameters which, in the West, or the Western world, right, are more or less valued. So, are the animals' expressive qualities more or less valued by humans? So by this I mean, for example, the color of its coat, the presence of ornaments such as antlers, but also whether these antlers are more or less symmetrical, or whether the body corresponds more or less to what is considered to be average. Then also, does the animal share more or less common characteristics with humans, such as being bilateral, or having hands? Is the encounter with this animal more or less familiar? For example, is the animal perceived as exotic or commonplace, or common? And finally, has the animal been associated with symbolic or cultural qualities which may arise in the viewer's effects as soon as the animal form is recognized? And so the way in which these parameters are valued at a given moment will allow each stage of a whole series of decisions taken by different players. So the scientist or hunter, when choosing which of 2 individuals of the same species to collect in the field, the taxidermist, when choosing which of the various bodies of the same species of birds kept in the freezer to naturalize, the visitor, who is more likely to stop in front of a polar bear than the badger in the exhibition room. So, finally, while some animals are present in museums, others are not. For example, researcher Natalie Cooper and her team carried out research into the collections of 5 major natural science museums in the United States, England and France. And their research revealed that there is a significantly higher percentage of male specimens than female specimens when these represent mammal and bird species with marked sexual dimorphism. But natural science museums have a figure of authority. They are historically perceived as institutions holding scientific objectivity. Now, because of this, not only does the differing aesthetic appreciation of animals in a society at a given time help to provoke disparities in representation, but in return, the museum can have the influence of reinforcing, accentuating these differential appreciations, which then become even more unconsciously present within a society. So, A number of theorists and museum professionals have already been discussing the extent to which the set of values implying that certain animals are more valued than others in the West is closely correlated with the set of values that have historically implied modern Western behavior of domination of the environment and of groups of minority people. Among other things, we can speak of reinforcement of aesthetic ideals of vitality. In other words, in one of the writings, Western animal representations have tended to value individuals whose bodies seem capable of fighting and surviving without a scratch in a wild environment, which many have interpreted as validist. We can also speak of a reinforcement of aesthetic ideals of exoticism. It's already been shown that exoticization, if I can put it that way, was used to legitimize colonial ventures and make their harmful effects invisible. Finally, we can talk of the reinforcement of aesthetic ideals of virility in the representational disparities between males and females, in vertebrates at least, right, that have reinforced a positive appreciation of more masculine bodies. They've reinforced a positive appreciation of the larger, more colorful, more expressive bodies of males, that thus reinforcing in humans a differentiated socialization between the genders. For instance, between men and women, if I stick to a binary vision of the matter. Thus, what emerges from an analysis of the influence that these ideals have had in the aesthetic appreciation of animal forms in the West is that they insidiously perpetuate values that run counter to those underlying a new environmental aesthetic that is ecological and inclusive. For instance, aesthetic appreciations of the environment that are freed from ideals of domination of nature and domination of certain humans by other humans. Right, so very briefly to wrap up, we've just looked at how contemporary issues relating to the exhibition of naturalized specimens touch on issues of questioning the Western relationship to what has been constructed as otherness, namely the non-human environment and groups of minoritized people, if I may put it that way. Oops, wait, I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. So, I put forward the assumption that an awareness of the inherited biases in our aesthetic appreciation of animals proves to be an important task upstream of the selection of naturalized specimens to be exhibited in order to help limit the transmission of these biases and the underlying values within Western society. And I suggest that this kind of positional work on our effects towards the collection helps to lay the foundations of a natural science museum that is sensitive and raises awareness of inclusivity. I'm not going to read the quote there. And I would also suggest that this helps to lay the foundations of a natural science museum that is sensitive to and deeply aware of the rest of the living world. So thank you very much. That's me, and I'm very happy to reach out to you, or you can please reach out to me. I'll leave my biography up here. There you go. Boom. And that's my bibliography also. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And also for being really precise with the time. Okay, now let's welcome Yenifer Carolina Cajas Guaca. I'm sorry for the... she owns a bachelor degrees in biological sciences, in ecology and biodiversity from the Federal University for Latin American Integration.
Good afternoon. Today I'm here to present my research. Okay. ¿Está funcionando? ¿Está escuchando? Okay. Good afternoon. Today I'm here to present my research with a project I'm developing in my master's program. In this project, I analyze biodiversity within the narratives of natural history museums. Okay. Understanding that Latin America and the Caribbean represent 60% of the planet's biodiversity due to their heterogeneous ecosystems, geography, and varied climate patterns, this region contains 6 of the most diverse countries in the world, with Brazil ranked first and Colombia third. Besides being 2 mega-diverse countries, they are also multi-ethnic and multicultural, therefore making them the focus of our research. Considering that the current climate crisis directly affects biodiversity and compromise that functioning of the planet, protecting is essential. Although biodiversity has intrinsic value, inadequate anthropogenic management has led to protecting its basic and assigned values, such as economic value linked to ecosystem service and the intangible values that emerge from the interaction between nature and humanity. For indigenous peoples and local communities, biodiversity has symbolic and spiritual value, shaping their cultural identity and heritage, as well as traditional knowledge for sustainable nature management, like medicinal uses, agroecology for management, fishing, etc. Therefore, conserving biocultural heritage is essential for societal sustainability, well-being, and the protection of biodiversity. In this scenario, the intervention of museums is essential to face current socio-ecological challenges. Therefore, we ask ourselves, how do natural history museums address socio-ecological challenges in their exhibition narratives about biodiversity? From this arises our research, a comparative analysis of biodiversity narratives into university museums in the 2 most mega-diverse countries in the Americas, Brazil and Colombia. Our research is currently under development and compares the exhibition, Biodiversity, Learning to Conserve, of the Zoology Museum of the University of São Paulo, Brazil, and permanent exhibition of the Natural History Museum of National University of Colombia. The main objective is identify similarities and differences in how both museums present biodiversity and examine if the exhibitions connect with mega-diverse contexts. This analysis is conducted through photographic records of the exhibitions and exhibition documentation, examining biodiversity concepts such as species diversity, ecosystem biodiversity, and genetic diversity. And exhibition resources like the textual resources, specimens, dioramas, digital platforms, accessibility, and interactive elements. Currently, our research is being carried out in the Biodiversity Learning to Conserve exhibition at the Zoology Museum, University of São Paulo, where we evaluate the biodiversity concepts addressed in the narrative, such as the concept of species diversity and its varied representations through its vast collection and other exhibition resources. genetic diversity with these exhibition resources. In this case, a mirror with the phrase of relatives of different and display representing the genetic diversity of our species. The concept of ecosystem biodiversity represents through dioramas of Amazon forest, Atlantic forest, Pantanal, Caatinga, Pampas, Cerrado, continental waters, and oceans. Given current socio-ecological challenges and the need to raise awareness about biodiversity, we ask ourselves, how can the museum bring urban society closer to understanding and protecting biodiversity, not only in protected natural areas, but also within cities? From this perspective, this exhibition addresses the largest metropolis in South America, São Paulo, home to the Zoology Museum, University of São Paulo. This narrative highlights urban biodiversity and this important contribution to ecosystem service, such as pollination in agricultural areas and fishing in coastal areas. This is extremely important to recognize the biodiversity found in the urban daily life, which also needs to be protected. On the other hand, we ask, who integrating these narratives into scientific and traditional context, and how do they interconnect? Is there active participation of communities that have a direct relationship with biodiversity in natural history museums exhibitions? In this context, we have an example, the temporary exhibition, The Secret Life of Electric Fishes, which showcase the biodiversity of South American electric fish endemic to the Amazon basin in the Neotropical region. This exhibition aims to spark the public's curiosity about how these fish produce electricity and the importance of scientific collections in expanding knowledge of biodiversity, using the museum's collection, live specimens, and other exhibition resources. This narrative also incorporates a bioculture perspective, featuring local Amazonian communities that have a relationship with this fish diversity, which represent symbolic, dietary, and medicinal value, as seen in the drawings of the Apka-Wara people. It also highlights the contribution of these fish to the contemporary society through studies on electricity and batteries based on their physiology, leading to significant technological advancements. This narrative was enriched by the traditional knowledge of the postgraduate historian from the Zoology Museum, specializing in Amazonian fish and originating from that region, which broadened the view of biodiversity by incorporating the perspective of local communities and their interaction with these species, emphasizing their importance for sustainability. This perspective brings urban society with locks direct contact with this biome, closer not only to the diversity of Amazonian electric fish, but also to the relationship between this diversity and our daily lives. Thus, we conclude that natural history museums' narratives can be socio-biodiverse, surpassing the hegemonic biological focus and incorporate cultural and ecological perspectives to generate a deeper understanding of biodiversity. As present at the Zoology Museum of University of São Paulo, promoting the inclusion and legitimation of ancestral knowledge, and supporting sustainability through museum narratives can increase awareness and action for biodiversity protection. We need narratives that remind us that we are part of the ecosystem and that it is in our hands to take action to protect biodiversity, encouraging criteria that lead to concrete actions. It is the museum's great responsibility to spread these perspectives to reflect and promote sustainability possibilities to mitigate anthropogenic impacts and offer new perspectives for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I invite all the previous speakers and also you to stay on stage, to go or stay on stage for the question. I think we are a bit in advance. I'm sorry if I stressed you for during the. Okay, so yeah, okay. So now it's time for questions. So I open this this part. So to the audience, do you have any question?
First of all, thank you very much for the very interesting presentations. I was very glad to see that students are bothering to make research in museology, especially in natural history museums. We were discussing that in the cultural world, natural history museums is not always very popular, like, let's say, art museums or archaeology museums. And my question is to Gil about the specimen that are chosen to be presented. And I listened to you, one of the things, and I was wondering if I'm right, because we have an argument in our museum who shall decide how the exhibition is going to look like, the designer or the curator. And sometimes there is a debate in between these two persons because the designer would like to have this exhibition more nice, aesthetic and so on. But sometimes we need to see, if we want to make a message, we need to show not very nice artifacts. So I was wondering if that's what you meant when you were saying that. Is this what you found out in your research?
Ok, I'm not. Non, en français, je suis pas tout à fait sûre. Okay.
I'm not entirely sure.
J'attends que le casque soit installé.
Okay, I'm just waiting for the headset to be put on.
Oui.
Can you repeat the conclusion of your research about the relationship between designer and curator about the decision what to show?
Oui. Alors, je vais essayer de répondre à la
I'm
question.
going to try and reply.
C'est sûr que je lis beaucoup,
I read a great deal, but I don't have the professional experience that you have. So what I'm showing you today cannot really transcribe the reality of what's happening, not 100%. But I'd love to talk with all the professionals who are here to get some knowledge from you, to hear what your answers are, to learn how it really happens. And I hope that in my future research projects, I'll be able to follow these projects and understand when and where these decisions are made. I was talking in a fairly generic fashion, a fairly general fashion. I think it's case per case. You see who is actually who makes the decision. But when I began my research and I saw what really interested me, it was the animal aesthetics and the influence of this. And I think at the time people were thought that I was more concerned with the visitor's experience, but that's not the case. I was more interested in the aesthetic experience upstream before and after the visit. So there's a framework of considerations, legal, financial considerations that have to be considered, and they make sure that these decisions are never taken by one single person. I'm not sure if I'm actually replying to your question, but I'm doing my best. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you. It's clear, and I was wondering, what do you think now after you started your research? Do you really still think that aesthetic is the most important thing?
Mais je dirais pas le. Non, en fait, je veux juste pas faire de hiérarchisation.
I don't want to create any kind of hierarchy. I don't think it's the most important, but I think it's really something that has to be considered amongst the other parameters which are considered. And I think there's a lot to be found in the aesthetics, emotions, the impact, the experience. And this should be considered as much as any mediation, that you're going to be represented by photos or a narrative. I think it's, yes, I do. I think it's hugely important.
Oui, pour continuer un petit peu sur ce que vient de dire
Just to continue in the same vein,
en fait, les taxidermistes à l'origine,
taxidermists, what were they looking for at the beginning? Well, they were looking to represent the animal that was as the closest to the ones that they could see, and make sure that people would consider this was the animal as closest to its representation in nature. If you look at the marsupial from Tasmania, the devil that was represented in the 19th century, we've seen it's been wiped out, this little, not the devil, this other marsupial. And so they show it as looking like a kangaroo, because we don't know what it looks like anymore. So the taxidermy has an importance. The importance of taxidermy is important. In the choice of presentation, of course, we're going to choose the image or the element subjectively, which is the most presentable for the public eye. But the importance of taxidermy is, I think it is the most important part when we're trying to discover or find the animal and place the animal in that position as close as he would be in a natural context.
Well, yes, I absolutely agree with you. And I guess that the museal taxidermy was, let's say, a willingness to bring together a certain number of types. But this notion of types is now being questioned. Why would this animal, and I'll talk within a species, right? Why is this individual more typical than another? Where we see that, and if we take the Natalie Cooper's example, I couldn't really dwell on that, but one of the conclusions of her research in these 5 major museums, right, is that in most cases the types were male, and only very few species had paratypes being female, where having a paratype with a type is something that is quite possible, okay? And only very few researchers go through the effort to have a paratype with a male type, even though one specimen, well, you know, there is the typical aspect, which is obviously central, let's say, but I mean, you could actually add on to this to have a more representative panel of species, or specimens, sorry. That's my answer, if I may.
I have a strange example. Yesterday, during my talk, I presented a spatial diatrophy with the, you know, of the Anthropocene with gates on the wood, huh? And the man in charge of the preparation of it asked me, "What kind of expression do you want?" That was really strange. I was surprised by the question. I said, "No one," and because in that case, you know, he had no idea how to represent it. I said, "I don't want any expression. Just present it without expression." But that was his question. Anyway, other question. Oh.
Thank you all very much. It's reassuring to see that the future of ICOM-Nathist is in. Sorry, listening to myself in French. That the future of ICOM-Nathist is in good hands, even if the planet isn't. I think I have a sort of a request, not a question of Yenifer, but how do we get closer to this secret life of electric fish? Is it recorded anywhere? My fascination is with fisheries and fisherfolk livelihoods. I would love to know how electric fish are attracted and caught and all the rest. But that seemed fascinating. But a more practical question is, we had Uwe's question earlier about languages. And obviously, if you're talking about a Latin American ICOM community, is that a Spanish Lusophone community, or does it also include Central America, the Anglophone community and Francophone in the Caribbean? That's a particular question. I have another question on Taipei, because the question of art vandalism is interesting, because we have a sort of vandal artist who's been socialized into a real creative icon, Banksy, in the UK. Do you have that sort of public creative art in Taiwan? And linked to the sort of the politics of art vandalism, do you have controversy over funding of exhibitions, or are the exhibitions mainly funded by the institutions or by the state? Sorry, that's two rather separate questions.
I'll try to translate this into Spanish.
Okay.
Gil, what wasn't clear?
What wasn't clear?
ICOM Latinoamérica habla español.
Latinoamérica.
Ajá, habla español. ICOM, ¿está escuchando? Sí. ICOM no hay traductor. No hay traductor.
¿Español?
Español.
¿En todos los países?
Español, América Latina, excepto Brasil. Brasil, ICOM Brasil, Portuguese, America, Latin American, Caribbean, Spanish, Paraguay have Spanish and Guarani. Guarani. speaking a language native of Paraguay.
My question was if the Caribbean is included in your community.
¿Cómo así la comunidad? Caribe, ajá.
¿Cómo están representados en esta?
¿En el ICOM? Sí, Latinoamérica tiene, incluye a Caribe también.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought it was a simple question.
Electric fish, ellos tienen...
Je sais pas trop parler espagnol.
Amiga, Electric Fish, Aquarium of São Paulo. Museo de Zoología y el Acuario de São Paulo. Aquarium of São Paulo.
Mais pour connaître les electrofiches.
But in order to know the electrofish, you could visit the aquarium and the museum in Sao Paulo. But perhaps you can discuss this later with an online translation tool.
The second question in terms of activism. And the question for.
Should I repeat the?
Yeah, maybe briefly.
I know the question.
You understood it.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for your questions. And so I think it's about, do we have that kind of art vandals in Taiwan? And as of my knowing that it's fortunately we don't have that kind of direct attack on existing artworks, but we do have another kind of. Yes.
My question, sorry, it was maybe a bit oblique, but do you know about Banksy?
Banksy.
Yeah, he's a graffiti artist in the UK whose work now sells for hundreds of thousands of pounds. He would have been a vandal artist. He's now a collectible artist. Do you have that sort of public art? And the other question was, do you have disputes around, say, the fossil fuel funding of exhibitions?
So to be honest, I don't know if we do have that kind of artist called similar to Banksy, but in several years ago, we do have, following the series of Fridays for Future Activism, Greenpeace organized a public art activity that engaged students and the publics to create a giant puzzle of a graph of a burning earth presenting in a public square. So I think that is a kind of public engagement and creating artwork concerning about environmental protection and climate crisis in that case, but maybe not like Banksy. And then for another question, I don't know much about the funding sources related to museums as well, but I know there are organizations campaigning for divestment for higher educations, universities, to divest from fossil fuels. So maybe museums, I don't know that well, but we do have those kinds of divesting campaigns in Taiwan.
Je reviens, c'est vraiment très intéressant vos 4 interventions.
Listen, this is really very, very interesting. I have so many other questions. I have a question because we're talking about activism here. Activism is something that we need to take into account seriously, right? Because I think it really shows the anxiety, the anguish, the fear of the younger generations regarding what is happening in the world. Well, we talked about Banksy, okay, apparently very interesting, but we see how important the role of the Nathist museums is to answer or to provide answers to these younger generation. I really understand that when you're 20 that you want to throw tomato sauce on a piece of art or piece of a work of art that represents the established system, right? And so communicating your rage against the system and in a way kind of breaking the establishment, right? So I guess that as an answer to this anguish, the Nathist museums need to play a role. I think we are in the decade, as I often say, of Nathist museums, and we need to find answers to this activism in terms of solutions. But I'm afraid that the various governments, the state, not doing anything, we need to do something about this. I don't know if you agree.
Maybe I have one for Syed, because you said that an exhibition and can be a it can be a tool for cultural diplomacy, and could it be in some cases a danger, because some decision for this can be taken at state level instead, and maybe the goal of the one who prepared the exhibition, if the exhibition is taken abroad in a different cultural context, could be a problem, in fact. By saying that, maybe I answered the question, but what's your mind of this?
Cultural diplomacy create a problem in changing exhibit. Can I talk in Hindi? Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
I mean, you talked about making traveling exhibition a tool for cultural diplomacy. But could we imagine cases where this kind of cultural diplomacy, by making moving exhibition in different countries, can be a problem in terms of the content of the exhibition? Maybe not, can be or could be not well adapted to the country where it goes, or the exhibition can tackle topics that maybe are not so well addressed in the new country.
हाँ, मतलब जो आपने बोला वो ठीक है, प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है एग्जीबिशन को ट्रांसफ़र करने में, मगर म्यूज़ियम ऑलरेडी ऐसा काम कर रहे हैं। जैसे मैंने एग्जांपल दिया था, न्यूजीलैंड एंड चाइना मिलकर डिप्लोमेसी कर रहे हैं। एक एग्जीबिशन उन्होंने मिलकर लगाई है जिसको टेराकोटा म्यूज़ियम टेराकोटा एग्जीबिशन उन दोनों ने मिलकर लगाई थी, और ऐसे एक्सचेंजेस हो सकते हैं अगर पॉसिबिलिटी हो।
Shall I translate? He's saying that, yeah, there are issues associated with culture, like these transfers of exhibition, but as he has given example from New Zealand and China that it is happening, and it can happen for, like, there are possibilities. So we do not have any example in India right now for natural history museums, though we have a lot of examples. So that I'm mentioning, a lot of examples from the cultural history museums that we are exchanging exhibitions, not only from the cultural perspective, but with South Asian countries, like we share Buddhism in common. So we have recently transferred our Buddha relics from the National Museum of India to Thailand. We have done it for other countries as well. So it's happening. So he's saying that it's not happening in the,
there are challenges associated with it. So similarly, Natural History Museum, and we have also like collaboration exchanges with British Library and British Museum as well, and Victor and Albert Museum, Met Museum, but we do not have with Natural History Museum, so we should also work in this regard. Is it? Have I answered your question?
Non, mais puisqu'on est à Nantes,
Oui, but as we are in Nantes, and there is an example that has been used by the press. It is an exhibition on Genghis Khan by the History Museum. So the History Museum wanted to organize this exhibition on the Mongol empire at the time of Genghis Khan. And so they looked into the geographical area back in the time, and they had a certain number of artifacts, specimens, titles, and so on. And obviously, all of this had to go through the, let's say, the filter of the government in Beijing, and they asked to rewrite a certain number of things or rename a certain number of things, taking into account the one and only Chinese empire. So what our colleague in the History Museum did, well, they went to the Republic of Mongolia, with whom they, let's say, finally built and organized this exhibition. So it is a very sensitive topic, issue, right, regarding Mongolia and China, talking about Genghis Khan. But it was quite interesting, and China has used 60 years of diplomatic relationships with France and China to ensure that Tibet does not appear in exhibitions in major institutions in Paris, right, that talk about cultural and historical exhibitions. They haven't really managed it completely because Tibet actually does appear in a certain number of exhibitions. But, well, there you go. This is a typical example. And then our Chinese colleague this morning, I asked her about, well, environment and so on. And so, well, she answered me. Her answer was, oh, yeah, we do things about microbes, right? So we do see that they don't, there is this, it's not a very comfortable place to be, if I may say. It's a tricky issue, right?
If you think of nature-cultural dichotomy, we are not just placed for nature, and we are also part of the society. And of course, we are concerned by this, also by this dimension. So we have time for one more question, if there is one more or two. Okay? Oh, yeah.
I would like to ask Yenifer again. I like the term socio-biodiversity very much, and I would like to know how, if you know it, how do the Museum of the University in São Paulo work together with indigenous communities? And I read in the newspaper recently that the National Museum in Rio de Janeiro is going also to work closer with indigenous communities. If you know more about it, can you tell us a little bit about this work? And you can also, maybe you can also make it in Spanish and I can translate it. So let's try. Yo puedo también decirlo en español. ¿Sabes un poco más cómo funciona la cooperación entre las comunidades indígenas en el museo en la Universidad de São Paulo o con el Museo Nacional en Río de Janeiro?
Yo sé de la Universidad de São Paulo. Ok. Yo sé de la Universidad de São Paulo. Nosotros tenemos el Museo de Arqueología y Etnología de la Universidad de São Paulo y dentro del museo, a diferencia de muchos otros museos de arqueología y etnología, nosotros trabajamos con las comunidades indígenas. Ellos tienen el derecho de venir y visitar, ellos tienen el derecho de conocer su patrimonio y tienen el derecho de dejarlo en el museo o llevárselo. Trabajamos cooperativamente con las comunidades indígenas. Muchas de las cosas que los indígenas de muchos pueblos dicen que el patrimonio ya que esos objetos están viejos y ellos los reponen, ellos hacen nuevos para dejarlos en el museo. Y muchos que perdieron su patrimonio vienen al museo para conocerlo, para aprender, para volver a aprender sus tejidos, sus formas antiguas de convivir.
Los usan las colecciones.
Sí, sí.
So short, so my language confusion in my head. So Yenifer, she said that there is a constant cooperation with indigenous communities when it comes to the museum at the University in São Paulo, and they have the right to access every time and to study with the objects, to study them, to reactivate techniques or design or whatever, but they also do new objects for their own cultural purpose. As far as he entendido que no hay muchas cuestiones de repatriación o expatriación.
Eso. En Río de Janeiro, con el incendio del Museo Nacional, algunos de los pueblos indígenas que se quemó el acervo, los objetos que tenían representados en el museo, los repusieron. Volvieron y realizaron los tejidos y los donaron al Museo Nacional.
¿Ah, sí?
Sí.
Okay. So she said that after the burning down of the National Museum in Rio de Janeiro, there was a huge loss of indigenous culture, and the people, the indigenous people, they did new cultural objects and they donated it to the National Museum.
Yeah, thank you.
Gracias. Muy obrigado.
Thank you. I just wondered if in herbariums or the museums there is also an initiative to, as there is in I think in Australia, to use indigenous names for plants, to rename using indigenous names.
Madame pourrait traduire peut-être.
Se usan nombres indígenas para ¿cómo? Para cambiar los nombres taxonómicos de.
Generalmente los que ya están guardados se dejan con el mismo nombre para no crear confusiones. Sí.
So usually it's follows the taxonomic rules. They don't change the names for not creating, to avoid to create confusion.
Pero generalmente son nombres indígenas. Generalmente son nombres indígenas.
But generally there are names, indigenous names or based on indigenous languages. Yeah.
Already done. Okay. So if there are any other question, it's okay. So we can conclude, and very warmly thank you all of you for coming and for a very nice presentation. We can applause them. And I have a kind of housekeeping message. because the next session is the poster session, and due to technical issue, the poster we are not able to print the poster in A0, A2, A0 size. So please download the posters to your device during the break. For physical participants, please refer to the QR code on each side of the room, yeah, those one there. And for virtual audience, please refer to the link in the notification email. So you probably get an email. So please check it.
Before you run off, I've got a couple of announcements as well. The first is, for those who will be
les sphères de la Loire samedi matin.
On the boat trip
Le
on Saturday
départ
morning.
est à 8h40 à la station Gare Maritime. Alors la station Gare Maritime, c'est très simple, vous l'avez sur le plan de Nantes, tout simplement. Hein, c'est une station de tram. C'est très facile à trouver et le bateau,
Gare Maritime. We'll be there to welcome you, don't worry. But you will be leaving at 9, so you have to be there for 8:40. You can see it's point number 9 here if you read that. In fact, if you want to go by foot, if you want to walk there, it's about 10 minutes from here. So that's the first point, make sure we get the times right. And the second announcement is for the visits to the museums tomorrow. The first part, then, the Jules Verne Museum is only open in the afternoon, so there's no point in going in the morning, it's closed. Only go in the afternoon. For the other museums, well, they're open, I haven't got the exact time, but it's usually around 10 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock to either 6 or 7 at night. We're not going to do any group visits. There weren't enough people registered to create an official group. Just go, have a wander. You're all members of ICOM. I hope so anyway. You can just show your badge, your ICOM badge, or this badge that you have around your neck. And I think it will be a free visit, but you're going to then be able to take the time to wander around the museum. And the teams in the particular museums know that you're going to be coming. So those are the two announcements I wanted to make for tomorrow and for Saturday. Is that okay, Phaedra?
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Phaedra's happy. So we have a suggestion for a meal together, a meal on Friday evening for those who are still going to be here. If you wanted to get together and eat together in a more convivial setting, perhaps you could organize something amongst yourselves. There are a great many possibilities here for restaurants around the museum. It's fairly easy to find something. We've nothing organized for Friday evening, because we're not sure of the amount of people that would want to be there, but yeah, why not? Perhaps you could, people come and see you and organize. Anybody who's going to be here on Friday night, if you want to get together for dinner, then get together now and organize it. Is that a break? Okay, a short break.